Hello, my name is Aidan Downs,
And I'm Tripp Dow.
and we were doing an analysis on
Their
that.
Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. Our claim we wanted to make about the book itself is that Janie is constantly manipulated, directly and indirectly, by the men in her life throughout the novel. We first see an example of this when she's talking to Nanny, and Nanny's just warning her about the real world and what it's like. She talks about how when the white man drops a pile of sticks, the black man has to pick it up, and then directly afterwards says, he pick it up because he have to, but he don't tote it. He hand it to his womenfolk. And kind of the idea here is that there's a hierarchy in the world with
Starting with like the white man, then like the black man, then like the black women that kind of have to carry the burdens, and
everything gets passed down, and the very bottom of society, just because of this power hierarchy that's been set up.
so our second quote was from Joe talking to Janie, and he said, "You behind a plow, you ain't got no more business with a plow than a hog is got with a holiday. You ain't got no business cutting up no seed potatoes. Neither a pretty doll baby like you is made to sit on the front porch and rock and fan yourself and eat potatoes that other folks plant just special for you."
Yeah, so there's kind of two parts here. The first is he's talking about how Logan treats her, and Logan treats her, poorly by himself, by both making her work inside, which was the general expectation of women at that time, which is pretty problematic on its own, but also expecting her to work for him because of his laziness and his self-centeredness, and his idea that Nanny also puts into Janie's head that she's supposed to work for him and just do whatever he asks her to.
Yeah, and another thing that Logan made her do was just work outside in the field with, as it says, in the plow. And Joe's pretty much saying you don't have any business behind the plow, which is also just, it's kind of contradictory because he's saying that he can't, or she can't be behind the plow because she's like a woman. But if in a perfect world, it would have been better if he had said you don't have to be behind this plow because,
Or you don't have to both work on the plow and work in the
yeah,
house. If they could
and
trade
that
roles,
Logan is overworking you, and which is kind of the truth, that Logan is making her work both inside and outside, which isn't fair because he isn't even doing that. So why should she?
Yeah.
And later on in Janie and Joe's relationship, when Joe gets elected mayor and he has to give his speech, he talks about Janie briefly, and says, "Thank you for your compliments, but my wife don't know nothing about no speech making. Ain't never married her for nothing like that. She's a woman and her place is in the home." And so pretty much what he's saying is that she's not good at speaking and social interactions, and the only good thing that she's good for is in the home, working and tending the housework and making meals for him and tidying up, which is very sexist because earlier he had said that um she's being overworked by Logan, and pretty much that's what he's doing. He's making her work in the home a lot, and that's all she's doing.
Yeah, and instead of there's nothing wrong with working in the house for men or women, but he's saying that for her, and making that decision for her, and speaking as if he speaks for her, in this case. And these townspeople don't know her, and so he's kind of giving them his own version of her that she now has to kind of act like to be accepted to them, and especially in this time to be a normal part of the society they live in. So our next quote here is from page 62, after the funeral of the donkey that Joe bought to feed it and keep it alive. And as he returns to the store, he notices that Janie's very sad and sullen that day, and he gets really angry at her for being sad. And so he says, not that he wanted anybody else, but just too many women would be glad to be in her place. He had to box her jaws. And so he gets really angry at her, thinking that everyone, a bunch of other women would be happy to be married to him. And this shows a lot of his self-centeredness and this idea that he's, the very dominant and more powerful person in the relationship, and that he thinks people would be grateful to be with him and grateful to, have a job running the store like she does. And his idea that kind of everyone wants the same thing and that he knows what everyone else wants, and just his own biases and his own kind of personality.
Yeah, it also just kind of shows that he's not really grateful for Janie and how she's working in the store. And if it was a man that was working in the store, he would be kind of more understanding, because, well, he's interpreting women, or Janie in this case, as being too emotional, but as in society, men are usually less. A stereotypical man is less emotional than a stereotypical woman, and so if a man is emotional, it's usually a larger reason than what a woman would get emotional for, stereotypically.
Yeah. Our next quote is from page 76. Janie just thinking about her relationship with Jody after being with him for what we assume is many years and probably multiple decades. The years took the fight out of Janie's face. No matter what Jody did, she said nothing. And so this is kind of her, just realizing that he's really broken her and made her feel, horrible about herself, because he's getting older, and we see multiple times throughout these chapters that he makes fun of her for how old she looks to try and help his own confidence, make himself feel better.
Yeah, and it's kind of showing that how he believes that women should always be beautiful no matter what age they are. It's their duty to look pretty for their husbands, and to make them happy by their looks and nothing else.
This next one is from page 147. She's long ways into her relationship with Tea Cake. They're both living together now, and Sop to Bottom says this the time about a week after he hits her. Tea Cake, yo sure is a lucky man, Sop to Bottom told him. A person can see every place you hit her. And Sop to Bottom then goes on to say that a lot of the other women, some of the other men are with, and who live in this village with them, would have fought back, and that's a bad thing in his mind, that people would fight back and that women would fight back when a man hits them, and that he should be grateful that Janie doesn't fight back, and kind of praising the fact that she's been abused in the past, and that she now feels weak in this relationship as well. So for our second part of the project, we wrote as a claim, "Their eyes were watching God" provides an interesting and easy to understand look at traditional and harmful ideas of gender roles in relationships that still exist today. And this is evidenced by the beginning of the book, just starting off at the first paragraph, when she talks about the differences between what men and women look for in their lives and kind of the realistic or unrealistic ideas they have.
Ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. For some, they come in with the tide. For others, they sail forever on the horizon, never out of sight, never landing until the watcher turns his eyes away in resignation. His dreams mocked to death by time. That is the life of men. Now, women forget all those things they don't want to remember, and remember everything they don't want to forget. The dream is the truth. Then they act and do things accordingly.
So one connection I wanted to make from the text to kind of real life and kind of my life is the idea we see throughout the book that Janie shouldn't do anything in a relationship, and that men should be more dominant, and men should always ask women out, or straight men should always ask women out, and always make plans in the relationship, and always be the people to always initiate things, and that women shouldn't do anything. And it's bad for Janie because she doesn't get any autonomy or any freedom in the relationship. And it's also equally just as bad for the men, because they have to try very hard all the time, and they can't really just relax and kind of have other people do things for them. They always have to like initiate things and start things off on their own.
So one of the connections I had made from Their Eyes Were Watching God to life was that the men often buy Janie gifts, such as when Logan bought Janie the mule so she could work in like the fields easier. But also, most of the times when they buy them gifts or buy her gifts is to manipulate her or to like make them do what they want. And just for like when Logan bought Janie the mule so she could work in the fields when she didn't want to, and so it kind of forced her to do that because it was kind of a gift, and so she kind of felt obligated to do so.
So for text to other text, I thought it was really interesting how this fiction book connected with another nonfiction book written by an author named Susan Faludi, who wrote a book called Backlash. And it basically looks at how third wave and second wave feminism kind of triggered a response of like people who didn't agree with feminist values or any kind of progressive values, who basically would say that because women are getting more freedom, they're becoming more miserable, and kind of blaming any decline in mental health of women or any negative effects on feminism or the feminist movement. And I thought it was really interesting how in the book a lot of the men try to make Janie feel like the more free she is, or the more options she has, the worse off she'll be, and that she needs them and needs to rely on them. Like Jody, who complains about how a lot of people would love her position and love to have a job like she does, or Logan, how she should work in the field because she's young enough to, and even Tea Cake, who has her work with him constantly. And I just thought that was a kind of cool connection, and also connected with the poem we read, a work of artifice, kind of the same idea there. One kind of major and more recent connection we made from the text to real-world events that have happened is the Me Too movement of the past year or so, and all the backlash that it's created from people kind of being deplatformed as allegations come out that they've used women to get ahead in they've used women who wanted to get ahead and wanted a higher position, just like a lot of the men in Jenny's life kind of used her and took advantage of their relationship by not being the people she thought they were, especially Joe, who seemed really great at the start, and we eventually found out was a manipulative person, just like a lot of these other politicians and celebrities. So to kind of wrap everything up, Their Eyes Were Watching God gives us a really nice glimpse into what society was like and what the relationship between men and women and the different kinds of relationships that existed then were like back in the early 20th century, and the things that have changed for the better and some things that haven't changed at all for the worse.